Here are 5 easy and affordable modifications you can make to your guitar to make them play better. So the first and the easiest modification you can make is going to be stickers and decals like these. These are designed to go on your fretboard, and I'm actually going to be putting them on that Harley Benton I have over there. I just haven't gotten around to this. This is definitely a matter of personal taste and preference. Of course, if you just stick any old sticker on the body somewhere, it could look cheap, and I'm sure we've all seen used guitars on Facebook Marketplace that have that sort of treatment. But if you get the right sort of stickers and decals, they're actually designed to go on cleanly and come off cleanly later, and things like these can actually look pretty nice. I've also utilized similar options for the headstock on this guitar, for example, and I've used these on acoustic guitars, for example, like this cheaper Donner acoustic guitar, which actually sounds pretty great, and it gives it this more hummingbird style vibe, which I think looks a lot better than it did in its stock form. Now, this isn't necessarily a modification that's going to have a tangible and quantifiable improvement on your guitar in any sort of way, but it is going to make it look better, at least according to your personal preference. Arguably, you thinking a guitar looks cool is one of the most important things in owning a guitar. It's what's going to inspire you to play it, to pick it up, to use it, and that's ultimately the point. But yeah, stickers, inlays, decals, that's definitely one of the cheapest, quickest, and easiest things you can do. Sticking on the topic of aesthetics here, the second thing you can modify on your guitar is the plastics. And by plastics, I mean things like the knobs, the switch tips, the pick guards. These don't even necessarily have to be plastic, but these are things that are pretty easy to pop on and off. These switches, for example, pull right on. You can install new ones pretty easy, and these can drastically change the vibe and the appearance of your guitar to match your preference, which, as I just mentioned, is arguably one of the most important things, you liking the appearance and the vibe of your guitar. I'll use this same guitar as a reference. This is a parts caster, and it has probably a somewhat polarizing style with the cream knobs and the torque guard and the pink body, but it's something I think looks really cool. Sure, I could have done a black pick guard or a white pick guard, something a little bit more understated, but with the torque guard, I really like the vibe and the overall aesthetic you have, so that's why I chose it. Here is another example of plastic modifications, which don't necessarily have to be your pick guards. With this particular guitar, a buddy and I cut new covers using his CNC machine, and I think this looks really nice. This particular trim cavity cover is a really standard route, and you'd have no trouble finding plenty of different versions of these online, just like on this parts caster I have that has this tort style one. And to use another guitar as an example, this is my Mexican-made Fender Strat. I replaced the stock white pickguard with this pearly one, and I changed out the knobs for these gold ones. I did a bunch of other stuff to this guitar, but I really like how it turned out overall, and a big part of that is the aesthetics with the change to the plastics and the knobs. So the third thing on my list is going to be the hardware of your guitar, and this is where you're actually going to start to see potential tangible benefits and improvements as you replace these. Things like the bridges and the string trees on your guitar can usually be upgraded, and in general these are parts that can usually be pretty much dropped in when you do a normal string change, as long as you measure ahead of time and as long as you're using the right tools to do it. Things like these Strat trims usually come in 10.5 or 10.8 millimeter measurements. They usually use 2 posts or 6 screws, so as long as you know you have the right one, you can drop a new one in, and I've done this modification a ton of times. You can even change out these components individually. These bridge saddles are different than the ones that came on the bridge originally. They're brass, which I think looks better, and personally I think sounds a little bit different. Or you can replace the block on the tremolo in the back. And it's not just Strat style guitars or parts. Things like this Les Paul have pretty standardized parts as well. These Tune-O-Matic bridges have all sorts of upgraded aftermarket parts, like this roller style one that I have, or things like this Squier Classic Vibe Telly, which has these brass bridge saddles. You could switch these out for compensated ones. These sound fine to my ear, so I've had no reason to do that, but that's something you could definitely do. And then switching over to this Classic 5 Jazzmaster I have, another easy upgrade you can make are these string trees. These are the little metal pieces that hold tension down on the headstock of your guitar. I personally like these roller style string trees. I think they give you a little bit more tuning stability, but there are lots of different options here. And as long as you use the right size screwdriver, not something too big or too small that'll strip out the screw, this is something you can really quickly and easily change just during a normal string change. You can even potentially remove a string tree if your guitar has 2. You see this on a lot of more affordable Strat style guitars, where they'll put a second string tree on the D and the G strings, and sometimes this isn't needed and there's plenty of tension on them anyways, so you could definitely experiment with just removing one of these altogether, which just reduces complexity and eliminates some potential places where you could have some tuning stability issues. And the last thing I'll mention, which kind of falls in this hardware category, is the nut of your guitar. This particular one is stock. It actually comes with a bone nut, at least I'm pretty sure on these classic vibe ones. This one was cut and works just fine, but especially on cheaper guitars where you have plastic nuts, you might want to replace one of these. They'll just sound better, they'll have better tuning stability and a lot of other benefits. This can sometimes be not quite as straightforward of a modification. A lot of Strat or Les Paul style guitars do have nuts you can buy that are pre-cut and basically drop in. But again, this is a bit trickier. Usually these are super glued down, so you have to be careful when you remove them. There are plenty of tutorials online where you can figure out how to do this, and this is definitely something a luthier or a tech could do for you pretty easily. All right, we're gonna switch back over to my blue Urk guitar here and talk about the next modification you can make, which are the tuners. This guitar stock actually came with some pretty decent tuners, but I am a big fan of locking tuners. Now, a common misconception with locking tuners is that they'll provide more tuning stability. This isn't actually the case, but they do speed up your string changes a ton. Now, I wanted locking tuners on this guitar, and I personally think these vintage style tuners looked a bit better and more appropriate on this guitar, at least with the other modifications I had made. These particular ones are Godot tuners, so they were a little bit pricier, but there are a lot of great options, and these don't necessarily have to be super expensive. If you're just looking to upgrade the tuners and you don't necessarily want locking ones, you can get really great sets for 20 to 30 bucks. And even locking ones, you can get a Fender branded set for around $60. This is another area where you do want to be careful and measure. The diameter of the holes where the tuners come through is really important. And then the way the tuners attach to the back of the neck is important as well, where the screws actually go into the wood. This can potentially be a more intense modification if you have to fill holes and drill out new ones. But I've made this modification a ton of times, and it's something you could definitely do on your own if you're just careful. As I'm looking at this guitar, I'm realizing another thing I replaced on it, which are these strap buttons. This one really is pretty unnecessary unless your strap buttons actually come out of your body for some reason. I ended up with these brass strap buttons, which I think look really nice with the gold aesthetic on this guitar, so I replaced them. Kind of silly, no one's really going to notice, but hey, I think it looks pretty cool. And this all brings us to the last modification I want to talk about today, which is the pickups. This is my Harley Benton Fusion 2, which definitely has the most complicated pickup system. These, of course, being 3 humbuckers that have a coil split. Now, pickups might not be something you'd consider to be an affordable or easy modification, but that's not necessarily the case. Most of the guitars I've done pickup upgrades to use GFS pickups. GFS, if you don't know, is just a really great place to get a lot of aftermarket parts for your guitars. Their pickups sound really great to my ears and are pretty widely regarded to be good for the price. They have what they call a quick connect system, meaning you can buy a completely pre-soldered wiring harness with pickups that will just plug in, basically making a pickup swap something you can just drop into your guitar and change a couple screws and bolts around. There are other brands that do these sort of quick connect style systems, but GFS is one that I really like. There are, of course, a ton of other cheap pickups too if you're handy with soldering, and this is definitely a modification that can drastically change the way your guitar looks and sounds, so you can get really creative with this particular one. Alrighty, so that is 5 categories of modifications you can make to your guitar that are easy and affordable. Let me know what you think or if I missed anything. And as always, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more guitar content.